Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyson Peterson. I'm Programs Chair with CFA Society Virginia. I just want to say thank you to everybody for showing up. We've got a great presentation today from Heidi. Real quick housewarming announcement. We do have some new QR codes trying to get some more. It's fragile, but we are trying to get some more feedback to see what kind of content that our members want to see. So please fill that out if you have some time. We'd certainly appreciate it. So first things first, I want to introduce Heidi Nel, who's running away while she gets hydrated. Heidi is the COO of New Theory Ventures, which is a family office dedicated to investing in female founders and empowering the next generation of women investors. Heidi has a background spanning from private capital, public policy, media, and entrepreneurship. She brings unique perspective on how capital is evolving. Today, she's going to discuss the most significant wealth shifts of our time and what it means for potential investors. So with that, please join me in welcoming Heidi.
Thank you, Tyson. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I wanted to spare myself from that awkward Marco Rubio moment a decade ago where he awkwardly reaches for the water. So nice to meet everybody. Thank you so much to Tyson and Ellen and Matthew and all of the CFA board members for having me and for allowing me to talk about my favorite topic, the great wealth transfer and the greatest transfer of wealth in history. So I'm going to make an assumption. Is everybody familiar with the great wealth transfer? All right, super. On background, I'm Heidi Nel. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of New Theory Ventures, which is an evergreen investment platform embedded into a single-family office structure, which I built and now lead with an exited female founder. And like most family offices, principals recycle their capital into the kind of asset classes or communities that got them where they are. And so we do a lot of investing into female founders and also into female fund managers on the early side. And over the past few years, we've become increasingly more interested and excited in convening women wealth holders because of this seismic opportunity. So the opportunity at hand is $124 trillion, an estimated $124 trillion, changing hands over the next 2 decades. People say a portion will go to philanthropy. There's a portion that's going to go to taxes. So for the intents and purposes of this presentation, we're going to call it 100. And there are 2 core components driving this sort of seismic majority and gender majority change. So $70 trillion or 70% of $100 trillion is expected to go into the hands of women. And the 2 factors driving that are 1, longevity, and 2, a shift in financial decision-making. A lot of people talk about this like it's a someday, one day activity that's coming. And it's not, it's here. We're 15 to 20% of the way through it. We think about it, yes, we're pro-women, and yes, I've built and worked with and for a female founder and investor, but we don't think about this as a moral issue. We really think about it as a market opportunity, and that's what I'm excited to dive into today. You can see we're 2026, 15 to 20% of the way through, and this first wave has been majority comprised of inheritors. And it's just shortly after 2030. So, give it like 5 to 7 years where it's anticipated that we'll be halfway through this transfer already. Kind of at the top level, the opportunity here, there's sort of like a baseline of opportunity and a baseline of issues, and then we'll get into how to close the gap. So the opportunity, $54 trillion, is coming from surviving spouses. So that's the longevity component, right? Women outliving men for 5 to 10 years. 47 trillion, and you can do the math, and I know everybody in this room will, so we'll get back to the fact that this exceeds 100 trillion, which I stated before, but we talked about the taxes and the philanthropy. 47 trillion going to younger women. So more women are finding themselves in the seat of power, the seat of decision making. What I think is cool is you can see it in cultural moments too, right? You look at the Colts in Indiana. You now have this sort of rising gen of all women who are running the organization, the GM of the team, et cetera. So we're seeing it across the board. And here's where we get particularly excited at New Theory Ventures, because I work for a wealth creator, not an inheritor, is women make up 13% of billionaires. And that's true here in the US and worldwide. And what's more exciting about that is women billionaires are outpacing men by 2.6x. So over the past 10 years, women are hitting this $1 billion mark at a faster pace than our male counterparts. Now, top line, there's 3 issues. I would say the most pressing issue is confidence and the confidence gap. So 84% of women surveyed say that they lack confidence in their ability to manage capital at scale. 66% of Gen Z women and 50% of millennial women have said that they've delayed active financial management because they just don't feel comfortable with it. And then 70% of female widows leave their advisor within the first year of that spouse passing away, not because they have a different preference, but because they don't feel like the advisor was ever really talking to them or engaging them anyway. So this is showing up in the stats. So why, if I came to talk to you about women and wealth, do I have a picture of a gentleman named Ben on the screen? Well, if you'll entertain me or entertain my story for a few minutes, this sort of gets to what I think is happening in financial markets for women. So cut to a baby version of me in 2008. I was doing a professional development course, and during the course, we're talking about kind of how you engage with problem solving. And most people kind of start with what they know, what they know, what they don't know, what they don't know, they don't know is kind of in everybody's blind spot. And the homework from the course after that first weekend was to go out into the world and start from a sort of like more uncomfortable place of not knowing. And so lo and behold, 2 days later, I found myself at this charity poker tournament, and my friend said, "Hey, do you want to play?" And I said, "Oh gosh, no, I don't know how to play." And then I heard myself say it and thought, "Oh shoot, this is exactly the homework I'm supposed to be doing." So I said, "Okay, great, deal me in." So I sit down at the poker table. How many poker players are in the room? Okay, great. I don't even know the language of poker. So you guys can help me. Sit down, the dealer's going around, then everybody starts having their turn, you're calling, you're doing whatever you do. And I said, "Oh, I'll just watch this first round." Naturally, people at the table were like, So the guy across the table looked at the guy next to me and said, "Hey, swap me out, I'll help her." So that guy comes and helps me. Lo and behold, I win the table. And I go to the next table, this tournament. And then I beat this professional poker player named Andy Block. Have you guys heard of this guy? I beat Andy Block. He was upset about it. Then I made my way to the final table with Ben, who's also like, might as well be a professional poker player. And it got down to me and Ben and I don't know, 1 or 2 other people, and Ben ended up winning. But my point is, I got from here to here in a scenario that I usually would have like not even sat at the table. And so it calls out 2 things. One is activation energy. This is an actual term. Anybody who listens to our friend Mel Robbins has probably heard about it. She talks about this activation energy. And it's the same thing that when your alarm clock goes off in the morning Do you get out of bed or do you hit snooze? And psychologists say you have 5 seconds to take an action, right? Because like all feelings are fleeting. And this is the minimum amount of energy required to start a chemical action. And so that the kind of takeaway here is that acting on something is actually greater than knowing everything. But for women, I don't know is sort of how we've been conditioned into holding ourselves from the starting line. And it shows up in these super sneaky ways. And one example of these ways is a facilitator was doing a training and asked a room of 50 women, how many of you are experts at breastfeeding? How many moms are in the room? I'm a mom. Okay, cool. Well, I don't know about you, but I had this goal of breastfeeding for a year. I couldn't, something happened in my delivery. It went sideways. I couldn't even do it for 6 weeks. So out of the gate, I was like, I'm a failure. Not only am I not an expert, I'm a failure. Anyway, so nobody in the room raises their hand. They're all like, well, I did it, but I'm no expert. Then the trainer asks our male counterparts, how many breastfeeding experts do we have in the room? And guess what? We had a lot of experts. So it shows women are sort of moving through life like, I did it, but I'm no expert. And men sort of, their natural orientation is like, well, I saw it once, so like, I got this. And why am I talking about breastfeeding in a presentation about finance to financial professionals? Because it shows up in women's financial participation. So this Fearless Study Women conducted in Fearless Woman Study conducted in 2021 by the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, that's a bit of a mouthful, really demonstrates this. So they have a multiple choice test, and they have two control groups, both women, very similar groups. In the first test, women only got 29% of the answers right. Why? Because we tap ourselves out before we even tap in. So most women selected I don't know. In version 2, they removed the option for I don't know, and women got 2 times as many of the questions right. So the issue is not competence, the issue is not capacity. It really points to this confidence gap. And here's the thing, it's not our fault. We are socialized to be this way. So I have a daughter. I see it, right? Like I live, eat, breathe, swim in this stuff. And I see how I do it to my daughter even. Girls are taught from a very young age to be good. And part of being good is being generous. And if you're not generous as a woman, what value do you bring to society? So it's no wonder we see so many women in philanthropy where we can give money away to the things that are important to us because that's how we've been socialized to identify our own value. Spending. We power the economy. We make directly or indirectly 85% of consumer decisions. And I think CPG accounts for 70% of the GDP, right? So we're over here spending, powering the economy. But when you look at who owns the economy, who owns buildings, who owns infrastructure, who owns energy infrastructure, it's not us. And then, of course, we're taught to save. Don't drink the latte, save your money, save it for a rainy day. And I probably have spoken to at least 1,000 women about their money at this point. Most of the women, including women you would know from TV who are super smart, super credentialed, have the bulk of their liquidity sitting in a savings account where it's literally losing money due to inflation. So a little bit of background. How did we get here? And what are our organizing principles as we got here? One thing that I think is fascinating about wealth is that the original root word of wealth is wella, and the definition of wella is well-being and prosperity and communal prosperity. And it wasn't until the first industrial revolution when sort of like the definition of wealth became more focused on material assets. So you have the first industrial revolution. The organizing principle here is muscle is power, right? We're going to work, we're building things. We move into the second, scale is power. We get sort of electric power, telegrams, steel. We're starting to do things at scale. By the way, like women still can't even vote. Then we move into the third, the digital revolution. Most of us have spent our lives against the background of the digital revolution, and certainly everybody in this room has spent their career in the backdrop of the digital revolution, where knowledge is power. The knower wins all. That is our currency. The person who knows the most, the person who knows it first. Then we move into the cyber revolution. Intelligence is power. We're building on knowledge, right? And what's kind of interesting right now is we're in this emergent fifth revolution where artificial intelligence and human intelligence are coming together. And guess what? Knowledge is no longer the edge. Knowledge is becoming ubiquitous. And the edge, I believe, is sort of like the meaning we can give to things. And I think the real edge becomes integration. How can we integrate across communities, across sectors, across people, across ideas, across asset classes? That's, I think, where the new edge lives. So knowledge is no longer the edge, right? Apparently, Claude told me this, so it could change. But apparently, we're sort of like coming up on the 70th to 80th percentile of the AI sophistication index. And by 2038, when we're projected to reach wealth parity globally, women will hold 50% of the wealth globally or control it globally. We should be sort of in the 90th, getting close to 100. And then we also, in 2032, I think this is an important marker because it's a piece of the whole puzzle, is we should get to 30% of capital allocation roles by women. Right now, I think we're at 10 to 14. And this plays out, I see it, and we do a lot of venture. So I see it in my day-to-day with venture, right? Why is there only 2% of capital going towards women founders? Well, because the majority of the people allocating capital are men. Sociology 101, we have like cells in our brain. We're sort of naturally geared towards doing things with people who look, live, sort of express themselves like we do. It's just biology. So we have to be extra conscious to break out of it. Here's the opportunity. If women are outliving men by 5 to 10 years, and some women, oh, thank you, are projected to be in retirement now, right? Like we've got this not invention, but we've got all these advances in healthcare, right? So we're going to live longer. What's actually kind of interesting about this is men have a health span that kind of goes like this, and then it just declines fast. Women have a health span that goes like this, and then we just spend a long time declining. And we retire with 30% less assets than our male counterparts. So it's actually critical that women, and we're getting women to lean in on investing, asset management, asset allocation, because that becomes highly problematic in those last couple of decades of life. Financial strategy also has to account for that health span. Wella, we talked about this a minute ago, right? It's the combination of wealth and well-being. So wealth is well-being, especially when you enter the lifespan component into it. And well-being is wealth. We shouldn't be shy about talking to our girls about a more holistic well-being, which isn't just their physical and mental and social well-being, it is their financial well-being too. But we've been cultured to think that talking about money is rude or gauche. You don't want to be that person. I actually think this is a homecoming for women. Women have always built societies of mutual aid, right? If we couldn't get credit cards until the 70s, well into the digital revolution, we were working together in other ways. So I think it's sort of a unique opportunity for women to come home to ourselves versus positioning it for us like it's like one big, hairy thing that feels too complex to dive into. You're seeing ultra affluent women kind of like build in this way too. So Francine Lafrac of the Lafrac Empire, New York City real estate, she just redid the Center for Wellbeing at Barnard College. It's a well-being center. She explicitly talks about the interconnectivity between financial, physical, and mental well-being. Sarah Blakely talks about the sort of holisticness of wealth and well-being, but she also very specifically, when she builds, she does not build with people who come from the industry that she's building in, because she believes the edge exists in somebody who doesn't know and who hasn't sort of like bought into, well, this is the way we do it because this is the way we've always done it. Here are the power players that we think about when we think about accelerating this new era. And the reason I think this is important is because systems compound advantage. So if we have a bunch of women leaving a bunch of their liquidity in sort of cash or cash equivalent accounts, it almost doesn't matter that we have this seismic 70%, $70 trillion opportunity. Because if systems compound in that way, they're going to keep compounding at a lower rate than our male counterparts. So we have to get women off the sidelines. If you take a more macro approach to it as well and think about our role in the GDP, what happens when spouses pass away, when parents leave money to the next gen, when you have all these female founders that are becoming centimillionaires because of the companies they've bought, and nobody has taught them about how to compound or how to develop an investment portfolio statement or how to think about portfolio construction. It almost becomes an issue of national security, right? And so the way we think about accelerating this era is through inheritors, allocators, creators, allies, and pollinators. We've talked quite a bit about inheritors. I will say women who I've met who have built and sold companies get into this seat and feel overwhelmed by what to do because we're not meeting them where they are in the conversation. Or they get to a certain point and it's like, well, now we've been with this advisor for 5 years and I don't want to ask what this means now. I should have asked that 5 years ago, right? Allocators. If women are deploying funds at scale and women over-index for investments into healthcare, education, financial inclusion, and entrepreneurship, that can make a sort of seismic societal shift as well. And I'm not talking about impact investing or concessionary returns, right? The care economy is a $650 billion opportunity. So getting more women in allocator seats. Creators, I've worked through it with my principal. What it takes to build and sell a company is a totally different skill set than what everybody in this room does, what it takes to preserve and grow capital. Allies, these are our male counterparts who believe that this is not a moral issue. This really is an economic imperative. It really is how the US becomes, and not becomes, but stays competitive in this shifting landscape. And pollinators, this one I think is really fascinating. everybody here knows, but off the top of our heads, what does it take for somebody to be qualified as an accredited investor? What's sort of the minimum threshold? Say it again. Yeah, exactly. And there's income related, and the income related one is so low because the SEC hasn't changed it for, I don't know, decades. And I don't mean to say so low, that could sound really privileged, but there are tens of millions of women walking around this country who make $200,000 or more a year, and they relate to themselves as spenders. They don't relate to themselves as investors. That's a totally different self-identity of power when you're walking and moving through conversations, spaces, meetings as an investor. We've covered most of this, but female investors say they want their investments to align with their values. And again, that doesn't mean concessionary returns. That's values aligned. It's not necessarily impact aligned. What are the 3 things that we can do to close this gap? Confidence. Close the confidence gap. We talked about it early on. Spot the spark. 5 seconds. 5-second rule. Not the 10-second rule on the floor, but the 5-second rule. Get in action. Normalize, I don't know. Make that comfortable for the women in your lives to say. Shift identity. I met a woman a few weeks ago who was like at a thing with a friend of mine. And I asked her what she did, and she was younger. And it seemed like she was kind of like in a transition period. And then I asked her how she knew my friend, and she said, "Oh, I used to rent. I used to rent a place to him." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Did you guys live together? You rented a room? What happened?" She seemed kind of me, and she said, "Oh, no. I bought a duplex and I rented one side to him." I was like, "Oh, good for you." I think she was like 28. And then I asked her, how that's going. And she says, "Oh, I have 6 of them now." And I was like, "What? You're a real estate investor?" And she was like, "No, not me." I was like, "No, that's actually what you are. When people ask you what you do, you're not between things. You're a real estate investor." So like working with women on the identity shift too. Number 2, care. Well-being is wealth. Wealth is well-being. Longevity is intersecting with how we need our money to work for us. Invest in the care economy. It's huge. Regenerative design, right? Capital for Women is becoming a tool to care for people and planet, to design values-aligned portfolios. These 2 things don't have to be separate from each other. And the collective. I think my daughter goes to school at some folks in the room. And one thing I noticed when we did the tour of the school is they said, it's an all-girls school, and they said, you'll notice this study area is not enclosed. It's not in the library by design. Girls are external processors. We want girls studying in groups where they're encouraged to talk out loud. And it's the same thing as a woman, right? Like we learn in peer networks. We external process. So build communities of practice. These can be virtual. They can be physical. Share your frameworks for how you got to a different decision. Talk about what you're investing in, what's working, what's not working. And when we do it together, we accelerate outcomes for everyone. And I would just close on, I feel so passionate about it for a number of reasons. Obviously, I'm a woman. I care about it. But I also do think as we look at everything shifting with AI, with geopolitical conflict over the next 20 years, I think this becomes a bright light and a huge market opportunity to engage women and for women to, through market rate returns, also sort of like reshape societal design. So happy to take any questions that folks might have. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand, and I'm not a woman, so I don't fully relate, but I'm trying to think of an age category, because you have your experience, my wife has a different experience. my daughter will have different experience.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, when is it applicable, at what age group? Maybe I see my wife different. I do see her as equal. I do see her as equal.
Yeah.
So I'm questioning if she has those biases. My opinion is she doesn't. Therefore, is it a transient biases that you're describing? Or maybe we solved them already. Maybe I don't need to be worried for my daughter. Or I'm just wrong and I'm arrogant.
No, I don't think you're wrong. When you say maybe your wife doesn't have these biases, what do you mean by these?
In terms of not being afraid to invest long term, or putting money in cash, or maybe confidence, like in this case I'm comparing to male, like male, so she has less or more confidence. I think she's more educated, more experienced than I am.
Yeah. That's awesome. Then I would say for your wife, and I'm in the same bucket, right? Like I have a lot of confidence when it comes to it. My husband might say the same thing. I'd say one thing that's important for the women in your networks that are really confident about it and that do feel good about it is to talk about it with other women in their community. When women see other women investing, they're 3 times more likely to do it themselves. Most of the social environments I end up in as a parent, the moms are sort of like off talking about school, shopping, I don't know, like some other stuff, camp, kids, logistics, how tired we are. The dads are often together talking about like what deals they're doing, what returns they're seeing, what they're learning. And so I'd say for women like your wife, that's awesome. And talk to her about it and see if she's talking to her friends about it too, because she could be a really great resource for friends to lean in more. And for kids, the reading that I've done is 5 is an appropriate age to start the conversation. I do it with my daughter. She doesn't understand investing yet, but just having like the different jars and getting her sort of like in the conversation is my goal with it. She also has no idea what I do. My husband makes ice cream, as my daughter would say. He owns an ice cream company. And so it's very tangible. And she's like, Daddy makes ice cream. What do you do? You know. I hope that helps. Yeah. Yeah.
That was fascinating. I think as I was listening to your presentation, Heidi, I thought a lot of this from like you mentioned sociology and psychology. Like, again, for the room, I have 2 daughters, right? And so I'm totally outgunned at home. But how much of this has like a genetic background? Like the word confidence, like I've seen things that like, on the one hand, the women are investing in low savings accounts, but like the number of bankruptcies driven by men's making stupid investments is way higher than, even if we were normalizing for participation. So were there any other sort of like psychological or sociological things that you found as you were going through this? Because, some of the things as a man really resonated. Overconfidence, like I'm gonna buy all this Bitcoin, I'm freaking smart. Yeah. Or like, there was another one that stood out. Like, I feel like in my job, I've normalized more I don't know as well. Like, everyone get, what's your take on this stuff? Like, you have to talk about everything. I can't tell you how many times people will be like, well, what do you think about something? I'm like, I've never looked at it. Why would I be able to comment on it? But, just curious, that kind of long-winded, but any other stuff behind that? I mean, the birth rate stuff, or the death rate stuff was interesting. My dad died. My grandfather died taking the trash out. My grandmother had a stroke and lived like forever, right? Like,
one stuff that I didn't put in here that I think is interesting to your last comment is something like 80%, somewhere between 80 and 88% of women who have gone through a transfer cited having at least one major challenge, and 4 out of 10 women didn't have a plan in place. I think that's also like pretty common, especially if you look at the generation above me, right? Like it really was rude to talk about money in those circles. I also sometimes think about my mom. We didn't grow up with a lot of money. And I had a lot of thoughts about that as an adult. And I think about it and I was like, okay, well, my mom was sort of like leading a household right around here. Where like women just were able to have a credit card, right? Like stock market participation. I don't know, when did NASDAQ hit? Early 80s? Later? Like that wasn't even really available to most women. So of course there's not a vernacular for conversation. The biggest behavioral thing I see is the I don't know component and sort of tapping out before you tap in, which is why I think that activation energy is a solid practice to get into. Yeah. And then I would say for myself, I didn't come up in finance. So most of my peers started on Wall Street. I had a steep learning curve. And then I noticed where I could take things that I do for my principal in the family office and put it into my household. I did a survey recently, and I also noticed for women between about $1 million to $4 million net worth, so like under 5, because once you get to 5, I feel like there's really kind of curated investor advisor options for folks. But like one woman I talked to was like, I just have $1 million sitting in an account. I don't know what to do with it. I'm too busy. I can't figure it out. I can't get an investment advisor that I want to work. Like I can't find anyone. And so I think there's this also flywheel that can happen for women between 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. It's not really happening right now because it doesn't feel super accessible. Yes.
I thought that statistic was so interesting, the I don't know one, going from 29%
Yes.
to huge.
Yeah.
So as you're talking with women or clients, I assume you're probably running into this same I don't know on the other across the table from you. How are you working with those women to maybe pause and process it differently and not say I don't know, but come back to you with an answer?
So I work for a principal who's also a kind of super thoughtful on a psychology front. And so internally, and we don't have clients, we're a single family office, but we are convening a lot of kind of women LPs because again, we notice, right? Men will like round out a round or a fund really fast, and women will go, I need to see more data. I need this. I need this. I need that. I don't know that I know how to evaluate this. And so we talk about an inside-outside game. So compounding confidence equates to compounding capital. So we kind of go really deep with the women in our community about what's stopping them, what fear they have, and then what are little ways that they can lean into that activation energy first or more. Yeah.
Your data shows, and that men investors are not investing in women-founded companies, or at a larger rate than I think you said 20% or somewhere around 20%.
In venture capital, 2% goes to female founders.
Yeah.
And then if you look at sort of partner level and above at venture capital firms, something like 80% of partners are male. Yeah.
So anecdotally, when you're talking to these women founders and LPs, what are they seeing and saying why they're not getting the investment from? Like, what is the reasoning that the male funders are not giving money to these LPs?
I mean, if I talk to female founders, a lot of times it's like, well, they just don't get it, right? And that kind of makes sense. So we're seeing this boom in women's health right now. And you see it in women's sports too. Like for Angel City to do as well as they've done, and then Monarch Capital is a fund that's sort of backing a lot of women's sports. A lot of men, and not for malicious reasons at all, they're just sort of like, well, I don't know, why would I do women's sports? I'm doing men's. And then you had some men who are like, oh, I can get a really good valuation over here. And I sort of like see the rise. And then more and more, like Alexis Ohanian became super outspoken about it, right? And then I think Bob Iger. So you had more sort of notable men getting in, and then that kind of opened the gates for more retail investors. I would say a lot of times, and I have empathy for it, I'm not saying men are malicious. I think like female founders in my experience, are building something that they solved for themselves, and they don't want other people to have to go through the same pain point. So what that equates to is then they're usually building something that solves an issue for another woman. And then you go in front of a partner or investment committee at a firm that's all dudes, and they're kind of like, you know, my boss built, scaled, sold the largest hair extension company in the world. Like, no man got that. Yeah, exactly. I think that's just sort of like that's like one spoke of the wheel.
The other is a quick follow-up question, sorry, is when it comes to the accredited investor, $1 million, and then the income level, one thing that we talk about internally is giving access to younger women who are earning but don't have the $1 million and can't on their own. Have you had any discussions about that with LPs, or are there creative ways where, unless you're a large RIA and you can sort of invest that amount on the firm level?
There are a couple of things that I think are interesting. So on an individual level, the Alinea app, I think it's fun for younger women because it doesn't feel, the UX is not like Fidelity where you have to like buy and sell, right? And that might feel overwhelming. So Alinea, you can also make these playlists like you would on Spotify, but you see like what somebody else's portfolio might look like. Or for me, like I have a playlist that's all sort of female founded or female backed companies. Because if this is my thesis, I want to see in real time, does my thesis actually prove out, right? And then one thing that I think is a bit of a pitfall, and I don't usually publicly talk about this because I do think we need more people funding more female founders, and those are the companies that in 20 years become sort of like the companies that our country is reliant on and that produce for our country. I do think now there's this narrative in the zeitgeist where it's like, oh, let's get a bunch of females, like women who have money, to invest in female founders. And it's like, oh, okay. The way I see women invest is like they tiptoe, they don't dive in the deep end. And so then I hear from a lot of women that are like, well, I wrote this $50,000 check this one time and it went to zero. And it's like, well, no kidding, because in that asset class, 90% of the deals are going to go to zero. So I think we have to be thoughtful about how but they go in that asset class because the check size is accessible. So I think I'm interested in, there's this woman, Kate Nevin, she's out of Charleston. She's 5th generation herself, came up at Lehman, runs her family's family office. She also runs a fund of funds that's all female GPs. Oh, you are? Yeah. Okay, great. But it's across asset classes. And so I think sort of her returns are strong, and that can become an educational opportunity for women, and you can get in at a reasonable check size too.
Yeah, I think the issue is the accredited, the needing to be an accredited investor still. So for young women, they can't get into it.
Yes. Yeah. Which is where I think that Alinea app can be helpful, because at that age, probably you don't need to be so much in private. It's like you need to be figuring out fixed and public. My take. Yes.
Thank you. I learned quite a bit. Since you did bring up ice cream earlier, what is your favorite flavor?
Ooh, a hardball question. Don't tell. I was a big fan of the Blanchard's Darkest Dark. I also love the cookies and cream. Yeah. What about you?
I mean, just ask.
Okay, obviously. Yeah. Hometown favorite. Yeah.
Rainbow cookie.
Oh, my daughter too. Yeah.
Don't ask them.
When it comes around.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on some of the projects that you and your team are doing at New Theory?
Yeah. I joined the firm in 2020, Wild West of venture. And my principal hadn't gone through her first exit yet. So we were running everything off of the back end of her now ex-husband's family office, which was a multi-billion-dollar entity set up mostly for energy and natural resources. And we've like spun up companies, right? I work for an entrepreneur. So we spin up companies, we sell them off, we wind them down. We did a lot of direct investing into female founders. And then what we saw when we really sort of put a more institutional lens to the family office infrastructure, right? Those are small teams. So we have a team of 4 people. And unless you're seeing 1,000 deals a year for direct early stage investments, I don't think your aperture is really big enough to pick the best of the best. And so about a year ago, we made a strategic pivot to back female fund managers as opposed to doing directs. And when we still do some, like we're opportunists. And then we're kind of working through what's a way to kind of scale some of the convenings that we've been doing with women investors and women LPs, and how to do that, right? Because the needs of somebody and the experience and the interest of somebody making $200,000 a year as an accredited investor versus a woman who's gone through a divorce and is worth $2 billion. It's so vast. But the underpinnings remain the same. And so kind of thinking through if there's a role we can play in catalyzing some of this. Tyson? Yes.
That's my question, is more on the convening side.
Yeah.
We do find that, like you say, women tend to not want to talk about their wealth, and even guys they want to talk about all the best deals that they did, but they really don't want to talk about their wealth, is what I find. So getting people, how do you encourage people to do that, to come to that convening, to be able to talk about some of this where people are uncertain about wanting to put themselves in that environment, saying, 1, yes, I need this information, and 2, I have money.
Yeah. The way I've structured it that's produced the most rich content, conversation, and engagement, but caveat, it's not at all scalable, is we spent a year hosting these 20-person dinners. And 20 is, there's a lot of research behind sort of like what group number works. 8 works well, 12 works well. I found that 20 works well as well. And they're one-table conversations, and they're structured as women's investment dinners. Because we're a single family office and we don't take outside capital, there's no pressure for people. We found sponsors for some of them. We covered some of them. And I noticed a couple of things. I've never had more than one person drop out before the actual event, and they don't pay to come to them. And everybody's accredited because I know they are, like I know who I'm inviting. And it's been really cool. Like you'll have on one side of the table a 3rd-gen inheritor who exclusively does philanthropy because it's all she feels comfortable in, and another person at the table who's IPO'd a real estate investment trust. And so like, within 20 minutes, people open up and say, well, what are alternatives? What are private market investing? Like asking these questions that I think what all the data points to is like usually we feel like too dumb to ask. So I've noted those environments work really well. Not scalable. All right, cool. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Tyson.